The first time I understood I was no longer part of my own family. It was Thanksgiving and my name was missing from the will. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally. The lawyer said it out loud calmly like he was reading a grocery list. I sat at the far end of my parents' dining table, hands folded around a mug that had long gone cold, listening to my life get edited out in real time. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I smiled. That should have scared them more than anything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the part everyone always gets wrong. I wasn't the wild one. I wasn't the screw-up. I wasn't the black sheep who disappeared and came crawling back for money. I was the dependable daughter. The one who showed up early, stayed late, paid her own way, and never asked for anything that might rock the boat. I was 32 years old, single by choice, after a long engagement that taught me the cost of silence, and I worked as a compliance analyst for a regional logistics company outside of Cleveland. Not glamorous, stable. The kind of job women like my mother brag about to their friends because it sounds responsible. My younger brother Aaron was 30, married, charming, and perpetually finding himself. He found himself through my parents' credit cards, their patience, and eventually their blind devotion. My parents liked to say they loved us equally. They also liked to say the weather had nothing to do with climate change. Both statements required selective memory. Thanksgiving at my parents' house had always been a performance. The same china, the same turkey recipe, the same jokes my father told like they were new. The same way my mother fussed over Aaron's wife Melanie, while reminding me I looked tired. That year, though, there was a lawyer sitting at the table. His name was Mr. Halverson. Gray hair, soft voice, expensive watch. He didn't belong there, and we all knew it. Lawyers didn't come to Thanksgiving dinners unless something was wrong. My mother clasped her hands together once the plates were cleared, smiling like she was hosting a book club instead of a quiet execution. "We just thought," she said, glancing at my father, "since everyone's here, it would be practical to go over a few things." Aaron grinned. Melanie squeezed his hand. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I ignored it. I'd learned to do that early. Survival skill. Mr. Halverson cleared his throat and opened a leather folder. The sound of paper shifting felt too loud in the room. "This is simply a review," he said gently. "No emergencies, just clarity." Clarity is a dangerous word when used by people who benefit from confusion. He began outlining my parents' estate, the house, the lake cabin, the investment accounts, the family business my grandfather had started decades ago, a small manufacturing company that still carried our last name on the sign. I listened, I nodded, I even made eye contact. Then he said it. "The primary beneficiary of the estate, including ownership of the company, will be transferred to Aaron Collins." Primary beneficiary, my brother. I waited. Surely there was more. A clarification. A second paragraph. Something that included me. There wasn't. And for my daughter, I asked, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. The lawyer hesitated. Just a beat, but it was enough. My mother answered for him. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, reaching for her wine glass instead of my hand. "You're so independent. You've always been able to take care of yourself." That sentence had followed me my entire life. It sounded like praise. It functioned like a sentence. So I said slowly, "To be clear, I'm excluded." Aaron shifted uncomfortably. Melanie stared at the table. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. "You're not excluded," my mother corrected quickly. "You'll receive a small trust for emergencies." Small. Emergency. Words chosen carefully like knives disguised as gifts. "How small?" I asked. Mr. Halverson answered. "An annual distribution equivalent to approximately 5% of the estate's projected value." 5%. I did the math in my head without blinking. Aaron would inherit control, assets, authority, and legacy. I would receive an allowance. At 32, my brother finally spoke. "I mean, if you ever need anything, you know you can come to me." That was when something inside me cracked. Not loudly, quietly, the way ice breaks under a steady footstep. I looked at him and realized he genuinely believed that made this fair. My mother leaned forward. "We just think this arrangement makes sense. Aaron has a family. You don't." There it was. The real reason finally said out loud. No husband, no children, no visible proof that my life mattered in the way they valued. I set my mug down carefully. My hands were steady. My heart was not. "And the company?" I asked. "Grandpa promised it would stay shared." My father finally looked at me. His eyes flickered away almost immediately. "Times change," he said. I nodded. So do people. No one laughed. No one argued. They thought the conversation was over. They were wrong. because while they were busy explaining why I didn't count, I was noticing something else. Small things. The way the lawyer avoided my eyes. The way my mother kept emphasizing independence like it was a flaw. The way Aaron already sat a little straighter like the chair belonged to him now. And beneath all of it, a realization settled in. They didn't just cut me out. They assumed I would accept it. That night, after I drove home alone through empty streets dusted with early snow, I didn't cry. I didn't call a friend. I didn't pour a drink. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the public records for the company, and I started reading. Because here's the thing, no one ever warns you about women like me. We don't explode when we're betrayed. We get quiet. And quiet women, when they finally decide to move, don't miss. The first thing I learned after Thanksgiving was that favoritism leaves fingerprints. You just have to know where to look. The morning after that dinner, I woke up before my alarm. The house was silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I made coffee black, no sugar, and opened my laptop again. The company website loaded slowly like it always did with its outdated logo and proud language about legacy values and family leadership. Family. That word had done a lot of damage lately. My grandfather founded Collins Industrial Solutions after returning from the war. He started it in a rented garage with 2 machines and a loan he never finished paying off before he died. Growing up, he used to tell me this place doesn't belong to blood. It belongs to whoever keeps it honest. I remembered that clearly. What I also remembered was the summer I was 16 when I spent 3 months filing invoices, sweeping floors, and learning how the place actually ran while Aaron quit after 2 weeks because it was too hot and not his vibe. Yet somehow decades later he was the heir. I logged into the state business registry and pulled the most recent filings. My heart rate slowed as I scrolled. Ownership percentages, board appointments, executive authority. Something wasn't right. Aaron's name appeared everywhere, but not all of it made sense. There were signatures that didn't match dates. Amendments filed during periods when my father had been hospitalized. Transfers that technically required unanimous board approval. Approval I knew I had never given. I leaned back in my chair, coffee cooling beside me, and let the information settle. This wasn't just favoritism. This was manipulation. By noon, I was sitting across from my friend Lila in a quiet cafe downtown. She was a corporate paralegal with a sharp mind and a habit of listening before speaking. I trusted her. I slid my laptop across the table. "Tell me if I'm imagining this," I said. She adjusted her glasses and began reading. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. "You're not imagining it," she said. "This is sloppy." My stomach tightened. "Sloppy how?" "Your parents accelerated transfers without proper disclosure. There are missing consents. And this one," she tapped the screen, "this amendment would be contestable in court." Contestable. The word landed heavy and bright all at once. "So they can't just do this," I said. "They can try," Lila replied. "They're counting on you not pushing back." Of course they were. That afternoon, my mother called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then she texted, "We should talk. I hate how tense yesterday felt." Tense, like the tension wasn't the point. I replied with one word, "Later." She didn't respond. That evening, I drove past the company building for the first time in years. The sign still bore our last name, weathered but proud. The parking lot was half full. Inside, people were working late the way they always did. People who had no idea a quiet coup had taken place above their heads. I didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, I sat in my car and watched the lights flicker on floor by floor, thinking about the kind of son Aaron had always been. The kind who talked big, promised bigger, and left messes for other people to clean up. The kind my parents believed in anyway. The next week confirmed everything. Aaron announced his promotion to CEO at a family dinner I wasn't invited to. I found out through Melanie's social media post, smiling photos, hashtags about legacy and gratitude, comments praising my parents for doing the right thing. The right thing. That same night, I received an email from the company's HR department addressed formally. "Dear Ms. Collins, as part of the recent restructuring, your consulting contract will not be renewed." Consulting contract. They meant the advisory role I'd held quietly for years. The one that paid modestly but gave me access. The one I'd never bragged about because it didn't fit the narrative of Aaron being the only one involved. I read the email twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was desperate. They weren't just cutting me out of the inheritance. They were cutting me off from information. That was their mistake, because information was the one thing I knew how to protect. Over the next few days, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't argue. I didn't post cryptic quotes online or cry to relatives. I documented every email, every filing, every change in authority. I made timelines. I requested copies of old agreements under the guise of personal records. No one questioned me. They never do when a woman asks politely. And then I found it. A clause buried deep in my grandfather's original trust. A contingency provision. If any transfer of control occurred without full disclosure to all named heirs' ownership, would revert temporarily to neutral trustees pending review. Neutral trustees, which meant the company could be frozen. Which meant Aaron's shiny promotion rested on a foundation made of glass. I closed my laptop slowly, my pulse steady and deliberate. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I didn't feel erased. I felt positioned. That night, my father called. His voice sounded tired. "You're being quiet," he said. "I'm busy," I replied. "With what?" "Understanding," I said. He sighed. "You always complicate things." "No," I corrected gently. "I pay attention." There was silence on the line, real silence. Then he said, "This doesn't have to turn into a fight." I looked out the window at the city lights, calm and distant. "It already did," I said. "I just arrived late." When we hung up, I wrote 3 words at the top of a legal pad. Not revenge, not anger. Leverage. Because if my family thought this was about money, they hadn't understood me at all. And soon they were going to learn the cost of underestimating the daughter who never made noise until it mattered. The invitation arrived by accident. At least that's what they told themselves. It came through an automated calendar sync, the kind companies use when leadership forgets to remove someone from an old distribution list. A board strategy meeting, Monday morning, 8:30, executive conference room. My name was still there. I stared at the notification for a long moment, my coffee untouched beside me, steam curling into the air. They had been so careful to cut me out everywhere else. Emails stopped. Access revoked. Conversations rerouted. But systems remember what people try to erase. I didn't respond. I didn't ask if I should attend. I just showed up. Monday morning, I dressed the way I always did when I needed to disappear in plain sight. Dark slacks, neutral blouse, low heels. No jewelry except my watch. The one my grandfather gave me when I graduated college, its face scratched, its weight familiar. The building smelled the same. Oil and paper and coffee brewed too strong. A few employees looked up when I walked in, surprised, then relieved. "Good to see you, Ms. Collins," one of them said quietly. I smiled. "Good to be seen." The executive conference room sat at the end of the hall, glass walls etched with the company logo. Inside, voices overlapped, confident, male. My brother's laugh cut through the noise louder than the rest. I pushed the door open. The room went silent. Aaron's smile froze mid-sentence. My father's face drained of color. 2 board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. My mother wasn't there. She rarely attended business meetings. She preferred influence without fingerprints. "I believe this meeting is restricted," Aaron said, finally standing. I glanced at the screen on the wall, my name still listed under attendees. "Then someone forgot to tell the calendar," I said calmly. "Or the law." The room held its breath. Mr. Reynolds, the oldest board member, cleared his throat. "Emily," he said, "we weren't expecting you." "I know," I replied. "That's usually when I learn the most." I took a seat. Aaron leaned toward our father, whispering sharply. My father shook his head once, the way he always did when he wanted to avoid conflict and failed anyway. "Let's proceed," Mr. Reynolds said, trying to regain control. "We have a full agenda." They talked numbers, expansion plans, workforce reductions dressed up as efficiency. I listened, nodding occasionally, taking notes. They didn't ask for my input. They also didn't stop me from listening. Halfway through the meeting, Aaron announced his signature initiative, a major asset sale, one of the original manufacturing plants, my grandfather's plant. "We'll reinvest the capital," he said confidently. "Modernize, streamline." I raised my hand. The room stilled again. "Yes," Mr. Reynolds said cautiously. "Has the board reviewed the trust restrictions tied to that property?" I asked. Aaron scoffed. "We're not here to rehash old documents." "We are," I said evenly, "if you want this sale to stand." My father stared at me. "Emily, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I replied. "Once the asset is sold, the clause is triggered." Mr. Reynolds frowned. "What clause?" I slid a copy of the trust provision across the table. I'd printed it that morning, highlighted, annotated. "This one," I said. The silence that followed wasn't confused. It was afraid. Aaron flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening. "This doesn't apply anymore." "It does," I said. Because the disclosure requirements were never met. Mr. Reynolds read quickly, his expression darkening. If this is accurate, he said slowly, any major transaction could be challenged. Correct, I said, and frozen. Aaron slammed the document down. You're doing this to spite me. I met his gaze. I'm doing this to protect what wasn't yours to take. My father finally spoke. His voice was low. You're undermining us. I shook my head. You undermined yourselves when you assumed I wouldn't read. The meeting ended early. They said they needed time to review. What they meant was they needed time to panic. In the hallway afterward, Aaron caught up to me, his face flushed. You think you're clever, he hissed, showing up like this. I think I'm thorough, I replied. You don't belong here anymore. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. I never stopped belonging, I said quietly. You just stopped acknowledging it. That afternoon, my phone lit up with missed calls. My mother, my father. An unknown number I suspected was legal counsel. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the lake cabin. It had been closed for the season, the driveway empty, the water still in gray. I unlocked the door with the same key I'd always had. No one had thought to take it back. Inside, everything smelled like pine and dust. I sat at the kitchen table where my grandfather used to drink his coffee and spread out my notes. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning exposure. The next morning, I met with an attorney of my own. Not a family friend. Not someone who owed my parents favors. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and said, They assumed you'd be grateful for scraps. I nodded. They always do. She smiled slightly. Then they've underestimated you. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. Not to destroy the company. Not to humiliate my brother publicly. Something quieter. Something that would force the truth into the open without me ever raising my voice. That night I received a group message. Family dinner, we need to talk. I looked at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, of course. Because if they wanted a conversation, I was more than ready. They just didn't realize the terms had changed. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding, blue shutters, a porch that sagged slightly on the left where my father never quite fixed it. When I pulled into the driveway, Aaron's car was already there. So was Melanie's. My parents' lights glowed warm through the windows, a picture of comfort meant to disarm. I sat in my car for a full minute before getting out, not because I was afraid, because I wanted to remember exactly how it felt to walk into a room where everyone believed they still controlled the story. Inside, the air smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. My mother had cooked, which meant this dinner mattered. She greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and kissed my cheek like we were distant relatives instead of fractured family. You look thin, she said. I've been busy, I replied. Aaron stood near the fireplace, drink in hand, posture stiff. Melanie hovered beside him, her smile polite, nervous. She gave me a small nod like someone acknowledging a storm they hoped would pass over them. My father gestured toward the table. Let's sit. We did. The clink of silverware was too loud. No one spoke for the first few minutes. It reminded me of childhood dinners after arguments when silence was the punishment. Finally, my mother folded her napkin and sighed. This doesn't have to be ugly, she said. I took a sip of water. Then it shouldn't have been dishonest. Aaron leaned forward. We didn't lie to you. You didn't tell me the truth, I said. Those are different things. My father rubbed his temples. You embarrassed us at the company. I met his gaze. You embarrassed yourselves when you tried to rewrite the rules quietly. Melanie shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should all calm down. No, Aaron snapped. She walked into a board meeting like she owned the place. I do own part of it, I said evenly. Whether you like it or not. My mother's voice sharpened. We gave you a trust. We didn't leave you with nothing. You left me without agency, I replied. There's a difference. She shook her head. You've always been so difficult, always questioning. That's called thinking, I said. You used to praise me for it, when it didn't inconvenience you. The room went quiet again. Then Aaron did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't his usual grin. This one was tight calculated. Let's be honest, he said. You're upset because you didn't get what you wanted. I set my fork down slowly. I wanted fairness. You wanted control, he shot back. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something important. He believed that. He genuinely thought this was about rivalry, not justice. That's interesting, I said, because control seems to matter a lot to you, especially now. My father's eyes flicked between us. What does that mean? It means, I said, turning to him, that you promoted Aaron into a role he wasn't prepared for, without proper disclosures, and now you're hoping I'll back down to protect family harmony. My mother slammed her hand on the table. Family comes first. I nodded. That's what you say when you want silence, not peace. Her face flushed. How dare you? How dare I notice I asked? How dare I read what Grandpa actually wrote instead of what you wish he had? Aaron's smile vanished. You're threatening us. No, I said calmly, I'm informing you. My father leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking older. What do you want? There it was. The question they should have asked months ago. I want transparency, I said. Full disclosure, independent review, and a pause on all major decisions until that happens. Aaron laughed sharply. You think you can force that? I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Yes, I said, I can. My mother stared at the folder like it might explode. What is that? Documentation, I replied. Every irregular filing, every missing consent, every transfer that doesn't hold up under scrutiny. My father didn't touch it. You'd take us to court. I'd take the truth there, I corrected. What happens after that is up to you. Melanie finally spoke, her voice quiet. Aaron, maybe we should listen. He turned on her. Stay out of it. That told me everything I needed to know. My mother looked at me, then really looked. And for the first time, something like uncertainty crossed her face. You wouldn't destroy this family, she said. I stood. I'm not destroying anything, I said softly. I'm refusing to be destroyed quietly. I picked up my coat. No one stopped me. At the door, my father said my name. I turned. This will change things, he said. Yes, I agreed. It already has. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. I breathed deeply, my heart steady, my hands calm. They still thought this was a power struggle. They still thought the goal was to win. They were wrong. Because what I was about to do next wasn't about taking something from them. It was about letting the world see exactly who they were when they thought no one was watching. And once that happens, there's no going back. The first thing my attorney taught me was this. People panic louder when they think you're bluffing. So I let them think that. For 2 weeks after the dinner, I did nothing visible. No emails, no follow-ups, no surprise appearances at the company. I went to work, I bought groceries. I answered texts from friends like everything was normal. Behind the scenes, nothing was normal. The audit request went out on a Tuesday morning at 9:12 in the morning. Not from me, not from my lawyer, but from the trust's compliance mechanism itself. A neutral, automated trigger buried deep in my grandfather's original documents. One of those boring safeguards no one reads until it wakes up and starts asking questions. Independent review, temporary freeze on asset transfers, mandatory disclosure of executive authority changes, dry language, devastating effect. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. I didn't answer. By 4, my father left a voicemail. His voice was tight, controlled the way it got when he was trying not to lose face. Emily, this is getting out of hand. Call me. I didn't. That evening, Aaron showed up at my apartment. He hadn't been invited. He never asked permission growing up, and apparently that habit stuck. I watched him through the peephole for a moment before opening the door. His hair was uncombed, his jacket wrinkled. He looked smaller somehow. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me. No, I replied, closing the door behind him. You need to listen. He scoffed. You think you're clever triggering an audit? You know how bad this looks. I do, I said calmly. That's why I chose it. He paced my living room like a caged animal. You're humiliating us. I'm documenting, I corrected. You're going to tank the company. If the company can't survive transparency, I said it was already sinking. He stopped pacing and turned to me. What do you want? The same question again. An independent trustee, I said. Temporary, until everything is reviewed. You want to take my job? I want to make sure you earned it. He laughed, sharp and bitter. You always thought you were better than me. I shook my head. I always thought responsibility mattered. He stared at me, breathing hard. Mom is devastated. That landed exactly where he meant it to. Mom clapped when you replaced me, I said quietly. She'll survive. His eyes narrowed. You're doing this because you're alone. There it was. The insult they always kept in reserve. I didn't flinch. I'm doing this because I'm done being convenient, I said. He left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there for a long moment afterward, listening to the silence settle back into place. Then I sat down and kept working. The audit moved fast, faster than my parents expected. Neutral firms don't care about family dynamics. They care about numbers, signatures, and timelines, and the deeper they dug, the uglier it got. Undisclosed loans to cover Aaron's failed side ventures. Company funds used for personal expenses. Board approvals retroactively filed. Not illegal enough to land anyone in jail. Damaging enough to strip authority. On Friday afternoon, I received an email marked confidential. Temporary governance restructuring approved. Independent trustee appointed effective immediately. Executive authority suspended pending review. Aaron was out. Not fired, but powerless. That distinction mattered. I read the email twice, then forwarded it to my attorney. She replied with one line. They didn't see this coming. That night my mother called. I answered this time. Her voice broke immediately. How could you do this to your brother? I closed my eyes. How could you let him do it to himself? She cried, real tears, not the performative kind. He's humiliated, she said. People are talking. They were always going to, I replied. I just changed the subject. She sniffed. We raised you better than this. I felt something twist in my chest, old and familiar. You raised me to be quiet, I said gently. You raised him to be protected. She didn't answer. I didn't break the family, I continued. I stopped carrying it alone. She hung up without saying goodbye. The following Monday, I walked into the company building again, not as an intruder, as a shareholder requested by the trustee. The looks I got were different this time. Curious, respectful, afraid. In the conference room, the independent trustee, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, laid out the findings calmly. Aaron sat rigid, jaw clenched. My father stared at the table. Board members shifted in their seats. When it was over, the trustee turned to me. Ms. Collins, she said, your grandfather anticipated this kind of situation. He designed the trust to prevent exactly what occurred. I nodded. He believed in accountability. She smiled faintly. He believed in you. That hit harder than I expected. After the meeting, my father approached me alone. I never thought you'd go this far, he said. I never thought you'd make me, I replied. He looked tired, smaller. For the first time, he didn't look like the authority in the room. What happens now, he asked. That depends, I said, on whether you want to fix this or just survive it. He didn't answer. As I walked out, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, not relief. Clarity. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It didn't end with applause or collapse. It ended with balance. And the knowledge that the daughter they underestimated had finally stepped into the space they'd tried so hard to keep her out of. But the story wasn't over yet, because power once exposed doesn't disappear quietly. It pushes back. And the next move would come from the one person I hadn't fully accounted for yet. My mother. My mother didn't rage. That should have warned me. Aaron sulked. My father retreated into silence. The board scrambled. But my mother did what she had always done best when things didn't go her way. She adapted. 2 days after the trustee took control, I got an invitation. Not a demand. Not a guilt-laced phone call. A lunch reservation. Her favorite place. Quiet. Upscale. Linen napkins. The kind of restaurant where conversations stayed contained and reputations were preserved. I almost didn't go. Almost. But you don't win against someone like my mother by avoiding her. You win by watching her closely while she thinks she's still directing the scene. She arrived early, already seated, posture perfect, hair, immaculate. She smiled when she saw me, the same practiced smile she'd worn at every school event, every fundraiser, every dinner where appearances mattered more than truth. Emily, she said warmly, thank you for coming. I sat across from her. You said you wanted to talk. I did, she replied, folding her menu without looking at it. I thought it would be better without an audience. Translation without witnesses. We ordered. She chose for herself as always. She waited until the waiter left before speaking. You've caused a lot of damage, she said calmly. I met her gaze. I documented existing damage. She sighed. You've always had a talent for reframing things. And you've always had a talent for minimizing them, I replied. Her lips tightened just for a second. Then she leaned forward slightly. Let's stop pretending this is about the company, she said. This is about resentment. There it was, her favorite narrative. You're angry because your life didn't turn out the way you expected, she continued. You're projecting that onto your brother. I let the words sit between us. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked quietly. She didn't answer directly. You've always been intense, serious. You don't bend. Aaron needed more support. And I didn't. I asked. You didn't ask, she said immediately. I smiled faintly. You trained me not to. She waved that away. You were strong, independent. You didn't need us the way he did. That sentence again. I leaned back in my chair. You keep using my resilience as justification for neglect. Her eyes hardened. Don't dramatize. Don't rebrand, I countered. The food arrived. She waited until the plates were set before continuing, her voice smooth, measured. You've embarrassed this family publicly, she said. Do you know how that feels? I took a bite, chewed slowly. Do you know how it feels to be erased privately? She stared at me, startled. I didn't give her time to recover. You taught me something important, I said. You taught me that love in this family was conditional, performance-based. I just finally stopped performing. She exhaled sharply. You think you're righteous? No, I said. I think I'm done. Her jaw tightened. What do you want from me? The same question again, different mouth. I want you to stop rewriting reality to protect your image, I said. And I want you to acknowledge what you did. She laughed softly. You want an apology? I want accountability, I replied. She shook her head. You don't understand what I did for this family, the sacrifices. I leaned forward now. I understand exactly what you did. You chose the child who reflected you. You protected the one who needed defending because you saw yourself in him. Her eyes flashed. That's unfair. Truth often is, I said. She sat back, folding her arms. If you continue this, she said quietly, you will lose us. I held her gaze. You already left. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then she smiled again. This one was different. Cold. Let me be clear, she said. I won't be humiliated quietly. If you push this further, I will respond. There it was. The threat wrapped in civility. I nodded. I expected nothing less. We finished lunch without another word. She paid, of course. She always paid. It was her way of closing conversations. As I walked out, I felt the shift, not fear, recognition. My mother wasn't done. She was regrouping. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the end of the week, rumors started circulating. Quiet ones, carefully placed, questions about my competence, my stability, my motives. A former colleague called to check in. A distant relative sent a message asking if I was okay, really okay. My mother was doing what she did best, controlling the narrative, painting me as emotional, vindictive, unbalanced. The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. Then the trustee called. Ms. Collins, she said we've received several anonymous complaints regarding your involvement. I closed my eyes, let me guess, about my mental state. A pause, yes. I exhaled slowly, of course. Don't worry, she continued. They're transparent and ineffective. But the intent mattered. My mother wasn't fighting the facts. She was attacking the messenger. That night I pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Old journals, letters, documents I'd kept without knowing why. Inside were emails, notes, handwritten lists, evidence of patterns, years of subtle manipulation, of being positioned as capable but expendable. I sat on the floor, surrounded by paper, and felt something solidify inside me. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about rewriting the story she'd been telling everyone about me since I was a child. And if she wanted to make this personal, then so would I. Not with shouting, not with accusations, with proof. The kind that doesn't argue. The kind that ends conversations. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. I need to expand the scope, I said. She didn't hesitate. To include psychological coercion, I replied, and undue influence. There was a pause. Then quietly, that will get ugly. I looked around my apartment at the stacks of paper, the years of silence. It already is, I said. I'm just turning on the lights. When I hung up, I felt it clearly for the first time. My mother had always believed she was untouchable. She was about to learn the difference between influence and control. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back. The hearing wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, no last-minute confessions delivered in trembling tones. And that was exactly why it worked. It took place on a gray Thursday morning in a neutral office building that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and stale coffee. No family photos, no heirlooms, no symbols of power. Just a long table, padded chairs, and a recorder blinking red in the corner. My mother arrived dressed the way she always did when she wanted to remind people who she was. Tailored blazer, pearl earrings, neutral lipstick, composed, elegant, unshakable. She nodded politely at the trustee, at the attorneys, at me. As if this were just another luncheon she'd be graciously hosting. Aaron wasn't there. He'd been advised not to attend. My father sat stiffly at the far end of the table, hands clasped, eyes down. He looked like a man who already knew the ending, but hadn't accepted it yet. The trustee opened the session calmly. This hearing concerns allegations of undue influence, coercive control, and procedural manipulation related to the Collins family trust and corporate governance. My mother smiled faintly. Allegations, she repeated softly. The trustee didn't respond to the tone. Ms. Collins, she continued, you will have the opportunity to respond after evidence is presented. My mother inclined her head. Of course. The first hour was documentation, emails, filings, timeline inconsistencies, patterns of decision-making that always benefited one child at the expense of the other. My mother listened patiently, occasionally whispering to her attorney, unbothered, almost bored. Then the scope shifted. Next, the trustee said we will address internal communications and personal correspondence relevant to intent. I felt my heartbeat slow. This was the part she hadn't prepared for. The screen lit up. An email from years ago. My mother to my father. Emily doesn't need to be involved. She asks too many questions. Erin will handle it better. My mother's smile faltered, just slightly. Another email. She's strong. She'll land on her feet. Erin needs us more right now. Then a handwritten note. Scanned. Dated decades earlier. Emily is capable. We shouldn't worry about her. It wasn't what the words said. It was how often they appeared. A pattern. A strategy. A justification repeated until it became truth. The trustee's voice remained neutral. These communications establish a consistent pattern of preferential decision-making based on perceived emotional resilience rather than objective merit. My mother leaned forward. That's not manipulation, that's parenting. The trustee met her gaze. It becomes manipulation when it is used to justify exclusion from rights and assets. Silence fell. Then came the journals. Not mine, hers. My stomach tightened as pages appeared on the screen. Excerpts from her personal planning notebooks, the ones she used to organize everything. Events, finances, people, including me. Emily is reliable but doesn't require reassurance. Limit involvement to avoid conflict. Emily may resist if informed too early. Proceed quietly. I heard my father inhale sharply. My mother stiffened. Those are private. They are relevant, the trustee replied calmly. They demonstrate intent. My mother's attorney stood. We object to the characterization of this as coercion. The trustee noted. Then she turned to me. Ms. Collins, she said, would you like to speak? I stood slowly. My legs felt steady. I don't believe my mother intended to harm me, I said. I believe she intended to manage outcomes. My mother's eyes snapped to mine. She decided what I could handle without ever asking me, I continued. She decided my independence meant consent, that my silence meant agreement. I paused. And she was wrong. My mother shook her head. You're twisting this. I met her gaze. You taught me that love had conditions. I just stopped meeting them. The trustee raised a hand gently. That's sufficient. My mother exhaled sharply, her composure cracking at last. This is absurd, she said. I built this family. I protected it. From whom the trustee asked. My mother didn't answer. The room held its breath. Finally, the trustee spoke. Based on the evidence presented, this panel finds sufficient cause to determine undue influence in key trust decisions. As a result, prior amendments are suspended pending restructuring. My father closed his eyes. My mother went very still. Furthermore, the trustee continued decision-making authority previously exercised by Mrs. Collins will be formally revoked. There it was. The thing she had never imagined losing. Control. My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. You can't do that. The trustee's tone remained kind but firm. We just did. The session adjourned quietly. No applause, no shouting. Just the soft scrape of chairs, the closing of folders, the click of the recorder switching off. My mother didn't look at me as she gathered her things. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She walked out with her spine straight and her face pale. My father lingered. You didn't have to go this far, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. I did. He nodded once defeated. What happens now? I looked at the empty chair where my mother had sat. Now I said everyone gets to choose who they are without her deciding for them. Outside the sky had cleared. Pale winter sun reflected off the pavement. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air. I didn't feel victorious. I felt untethered. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you've won. You've just made yourself an enemy. I stared at the screen, then typed back. I stopped living for your approval a long time ago. I turned the phone off and set it down. For the first time in my life, my mother no longer defined the boundaries of my world. And once that kind of power is taken away, it doesn't disappear quietly. It looks for somewhere else to land, which meant the next move wouldn't come from her. It would come from the one person who had lost everything and had nothing left to protect. My brother. Aaron disappeared for 3 days after the hearing. No calls, no texts, no public appearances. His social media went dark, which for him was more alarming than silence. He'd always needed an audience, applause even if it was hollow. Especially if it was hollow. When someone like that goes quiet, it isn't peace. It's pressure building. I was leaving my office late Friday afternoon when I felt it before I saw it. That familiar tightening between my shoulders, the sense of being watched. His car was parked across the street, engine running, windows tinted just enough to feel intentional. I didn't turn around. I unlocked my car, calmly got in, and closed the door. He knocked on my window. Hard. I lowered it halfway. "What do you want, Aaron?" I asked. He leaned down, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. "Get out. We need to talk." "Say it here." His laugh was short and sharp, still hiding behind rules. I met his gaze, still ignoring them. He straightened, ran a hand through his hair. "You think you're clever, turning Mom into a liability." "I didn't turn her into anything," I said. "I stopped covering for her." He scoffed. "You always play the victim." That word again. "I played invisible," I corrected. "You just never noticed." His face darkened. "You ruined my life." I tilted my head slightly. "No, I stopped lying about it." "That did it." He slammed his hand against my car door. I didn't flinch. I'd flinched enough for both of us growing up. "You took everything," he hissed. "The company, Mom's trust, my future." "You lost control," I said evenly. "Those aren't the same. You always hated me." I stared at him, stunned by the sincerity in his voice. "No," I said quietly. "I hated how much they excused you." He laughed bitterly. "Same thing." I shook my head. "No, it's not." For a moment, something like doubt flickered across his face. Then it vanished, replaced by something reckless. "You think this is over," he said. "You think you can just walk away clean." I didn't answer. He leaned closer. "I know things about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" "You're not as perfect as you pretend," he said. I could talk. To whom, I asked. "The same people you've been lying to for years." His mouth tightened. "Careful," he warned. "I don't have anything left to protect." "That's what makes you dangerous," I said. "And predictable." He stepped back, breathing hard. "You always talk like you're above this." "I talk like I've already survived it," I replied. He stared at me for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile this time. Empty, cold. "Enjoy your little victory," he said. "It won't last." Then he turned and walked away, peeling out of the parking spot like the world owed him something. I sat there for a few minutes afterward, hands steady on the steering wheel, heart finally catching up with the moment. He wasn't bluffing. The following week proved it. It started with an email sent to the board, copied to the trustee and legal counsel. Anonymous. Allegations about my conduct, claims that I had manipulated the trust process for personal gain, that I'd coerced employees, that I'd misrepresented communications. Baseless, but detailed. Someone had taken the time to dress the lies carefully. Then came the whisper campaign. A former coworker asked if I was okay. A distant cousin asked why I'd turned on my own family. A journalist left a voicemail asking for comment on internal disputes. Aaron was talking. Not loudly. Strategically. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to poison the ground so nothing could grow afterward. I met with my attorney the same day. "He's escalating," she said. "This is reputational warfare." "I know," I replied. "Do you want to respond publicly?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She studied me. "You have leverage." "I know," I said again. "That's why I haven't used it." That night, I opened the folder I'd sworn I wouldn't touch unless I had to. The one labeled Aaron Years. Inside were things I'd collected passively without intention. Emails he'd forwarded me accidentally. Messages he'd asked me to proofread. Documents he'd stored in shared folders because he assumed I wasn't paying attention. Failed ventures, misappropriated funds, side deals that never quite crossed into illegality but hovered close enough to smell like it. And then there was the voicemail. He'd left it months ago, late at night, drunk, complaining about the pressure, about Mom, about how everything would be easier if I'd just stayed quiet. I listened to it once. Then again, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt sad. This was who he'd always been. Loud confidence wrapped around quiet desperation. A man propped up so long he never learned how to stand. The next morning, I received a message from the trustee. "We've received new claims. We are investigating." I replied immediately. "I have documentation. Let me know when you're ready." Her response came quickly. "We are." The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Aaron arrived late, unshaven, agitated. He avoided my eyes as he took his seat. The trustee didn't waste time. "Mr. Collins, she said you submitted allegations against your sister." "Yes," he said sharply, "because she's been manipulating everything." "Then you won't mind us reviewing this," she replied, sliding a folder across the table. He frowned, flipped it open, and went pale. "Do you recognize these?" she asked. Silence. I watched his hands shake slightly. "These records," she continued, "indicate repeated financial improprieties and misrepresentations, including actions taken after your authority was suspended." Aaron looked up, eyes wild. "She set me up." The trustee looked at me. "Did you?" "No," I said simply. I stopped covering. The room was quiet except for Aaron's breathing. This hearing, the trustee said, will determine whether your actions constitute breach of fiduciary duty. Aaron laughed high and brittle. You always do this. You always make me look like the bad guy. I met his gaze. You did that yourself, I said. I just stopped cleaning it up. For the first time, he looked at me not with anger, but with something closer to panic. He understood now. The family shield was gone, and he was standing alone. The hearing ended without resolution, but the direction was clear. As we stood to leave, Aaron muttered under his breath, I hope it was worth it. I paused, turned, and said it was necessary. That night I slept deeply. Not because the fight was over, but because I'd finally stopped pretending I could save someone who didn't want to be accountable. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was simply letting the truth finish what silence had started. And Aaron was running out of places to hide. The consequences didn't arrive with sirens. They arrived in envelopes. Thick ones, cream-colored, official. The kind that don't threaten, don't explain, don't negotiate. They simply inform you that something has already happened. Aaron received his first on a Monday morning. I know because he called me 5 minutes after the courier left his building. I didn't answer. I knew what it was. Notice of breach. Formal inquiry. Temporary restriction on financial activity pending review. By Wednesday, his accounts were frozen. By Friday, the company issued a neutral internal memo announcing that Aaron Collins was no longer affiliated in any executive or advisory capacity effective immediately pending ongoing review. No drama, no details, just distance. That kind of language is lethal to people who survive on status. My father called me that night. His voice sounded hollow, stripped of authority. They're pushing him out, he said. I stared out my apartment window at the city lights. No, I replied. They're stepping away. He's your brother, my father said weakly. Yes, I said, and he's an adult. Silence stretched. You didn't have to let it go this far, he finally said. I closed my eyes. You didn't have to let it start. That was the first time he didn't argue. Aaron tried once more. This time it wasn't anger. It was bargaining. He showed up at my door, late eyes, sunken jacket too thin for the cold. He looked like someone who'd finally met gravity and didn't like how it felt. I need help, he said. I didn't step aside. With what I asked. He swallowed. I can fix this. If you talk to the trustee, if you explain what I asked. That you forged approvals, that you used company funds after suspension, that you tried to smear me when you got scared. His shoulders slumped. I didn't think it would go this far. That's the problem, I said quietly. You never do. He looked up at me, desperation sharp in his eyes. I'll apologize. I nodded slowly. To whom? To you, he said quickly. To Mom, to everyone. I studied his face. The cracks, the fear, the reflex to perform remorse when consequences arrived. An apology doesn't undo a pattern, I said. It just acknowledges it. So that's it, he asked. You're just going to let me burn. I met his gaze. I'm going to let you stand on what you built. He laughed softly, broken. You always think you're better than me. I shook my head. I think I'm done pretending. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded once. A small, defeated motion. Enjoy your clean hands, he said. I watched him walk away without stopping him. That was the hardest part. Not the hearings, not the documents, not the fallout. Walking away from the last illusion that I could fix him. The trustee's final determination arrived 2 weeks later. Breach confirmed. Authority revoked permanently. Restitution required. Not prison, not ruin. Accountability. My mother didn't speak to me after that. She sent a letter instead. Handwritten, controlled, every sentence measured. You have always misunderstood my intentions. I did what I believed was best for this family. I hope one day you understand the cost of your actions. No apology, no acknowledgement, just grief dressed as righteousness. I folded the letter and put it away. Not because it mattered, but because it finally didn't. The company stabilized, new leadership, transparent processes, quiet competence. The trustee offered me a formal role. I declined. I don't want power, I said. I want distance. She nodded. That's usually how I know who deserves it. I stayed on as a passive shareholder, nothing more. The revenge wasn't taking his place. It was refusing to become him. Months passed. Aaron moved out of state. No forwarding address, no goodbye. My parents downsized, sold the house, retired early. The family dinners stopped. And in that absence, something unexpected happened. I slept, deeply, easily, without bracing myself for the next demand. One evening, as autumn settled in, I sat alone with a glass of wine and realized I hadn't thought about winning in weeks. I'd been thinking about breathing. About what it felt like to live without anticipating correction. The injustice had been real. The betrayal had been sharp. But the revenge wasn't explosive. It was quiet, sustained, irreversible. It was choosing truth over harmony. Boundaries over approval. Reality over roles. I didn't get closure in the way stories promise. I got something better. Peace without permission. And the understanding that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone who wronged you. It's building a life where they no longer matter at all. But the story wasn't quite finished yet. Because just when you think the past has nothing left to say, it finds one final way to speak. And this time it wouldn't be through conflict. It would be through inheritance. The kind no one expects. The kind that changes everything. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing spreadsheets at work. An unfamiliar number. Out of state. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my chest tightened the way it does right before weather changes. "Ms. Collins," a man asked when I answered. "Yes, this is Daniel Mercer. I'm calling in my capacity as executor for the estate of Margaret Collins. My grandmother." The name landed softly like a door closing rather than opening. She had died 3 weeks earlier. I'd known, of course. My mother had texted me the news in a single sentence, no punctuation. I hadn't gone to the funeral. Neither had Aaron. Family had become a word people used when it suited them. "I didn't realize she'd appointed an external executor," I said. "She did," Daniel replied. "Several years ago. She was very specific." That didn't surprise me. My grandmother had been quiet, observant, and underestimated in much the same way I had. She rarely interfered directly, but she saw everything, especially what people thought they were hiding. "There's a matter that requires your presence," Daniel continued, "preferably in person. I close my laptop when, tomorrow if possible." The office was small and nondescript, tucked above a real estate firm downtown. No portraits, no heavy furniture, just files, shelves, and a sense of order that felt deliberate. Daniel was younger than I expected, early 40s, calm eyes, no unnecessary warmth. "She anticipated resistance," he said as we sat. "That's why she kept this separate." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a letter, my name written in my grandmother's familiar hand. "Emily, if you are reading this, then the noise has finally settled enough for truth to speak. I have watched you carry what others refuse to see. I have watched you be reasonable when reason was used against you. This is not a gift, it is a correction." I felt my throat tighten. "She left you something," Daniel said gently, "outside the family trust." He explained it slowly. Years earlier, my grandmother had quietly transferred ownership of a separate holding company into a private trust. A company no one talked about because it wasn't flashy. It held patents, licensing agreements, long-term contracts, assets that didn't scream wealth, assets that endured. She had named me sole beneficiary, not immediately, not publicly, contingent upon a single condition, that I not contest the primary family trust for personal gain. I laughed softly, she knew. Daniel nodded. "She believed you would choose integrity over entitlement." The irony almost made me dizzy. The woman my family dismissed as frail and irrelevant had seen the entire arc before it unfolded. She had known the favoritism would collapse under its own weight, and she had planned for the aftermath. "She wanted you to have leverage without becoming what you opposed," Daniel said, her words. I sat there stunned. This wasn't a windfall. It was insulation. The holding company alone generated enough passive income to change my life quietly. No board seat, no press, no family interference. And with it came a final instruction. "Do not tell them. Let this be yours without explanation." When I left the office, the city felt different. Sharper, clearer, as if I'd stepped into a version of reality that had been waiting for me to catch up. That night my mother called. I let it ring. Then she texted, "We should discuss your grandmother's affairs." I stared at the message, then set the phone face down. For once I didn't owe anyone clarity. Over the next few weeks, the pieces settled into place. The holding company's legal team contacted me discreetly. I signed documents, asked questions, learned. I didn't upgrade my apartment. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell a soul. Power doesn't announce itself when it's real. It hums quietly in the background, steady and reliable. My father reached out once tentative, asked if I'd received anything from Grandma's estate. "I received what she intended," I replied. He didn't press. Aaron never contacted me again. And somewhere in that silence I realized the strangest thing of all. I wasn't angry anymore. The injustice had been addressed, not by punishment but by alignment. Everyone ended up where their choices led. My parents with their narrative intact but diminished. Aaron with consequences he couldn't talk his way out of. And me with something I'd never been given before. Autonomy. The kind that doesn't need permission or validation. The kind that doesn't require proving anything to anyone. The kind my grandmother had protected patiently until I was ready to carry it. One evening, months later, I opened the letter again and read the last line I'd missed through tears the first time. Silence is not weakness, it is preparation. I folded the letter and placed it back in the folder. The inheritance wasn't money, it was understanding, and it changed everything. Because now when the story moved forward, it would do so on my terms, not as a reaction, but as a beginning. The past has a way of knocking when you stop expecting it. It was early spring when my mother tried one last time, not with anger, not with threats, with nostalgia. The message came as an email subject line carefully chosen to sound harmless. Thinking of you. No punctuation, no urgency, just an invitation disguised as sentiment. I didn't open it right away. I already knew the tone. Soft, reflective, heavy with implication. My mother had always believed memory was a weapon if you held it correctly. I let it sit for a full day before reading it. Emily. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about mistakes, about family. I don't want us to end like this. Life is too short, and I worry we're losing something that can't be replaced. I would like to talk, just the two of us. No lawyers, no history, just mother and daughter. There it was. No history. I almost laughed. You don't erase decades by requesting a clean slate. You don't rewrite a pattern by pretending it never existed. But she had always believed in fresh starts that benefited her. I didn't reply. 2 days later, she showed up. I was walking into my apartment building when I saw her across the street. Same posture, same coat she'd worn for years. A woman who understood the power of familiarity. She smiled when she saw me, relief crossing her face, as if we'd stumbled into each other by accident. Emily, she said, I hoped I'd catch you. I stopped, not out of obligation, out of curiosity. You shouldn't be here, I said calmly. She clasped her hands together. I just wanted to see you. You didn't respond. I saw the message, and I didn't reply. Her smile tightened. You've always been stubborn. I tilted my head. You've always called boundaries stubbornness. She sighed, looking older than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Can we talk, she asked, please. I considered it. Not because I owed her anything, but because there was something unfinished and I didn't want it living in the corners of my life anymore. There's a cafe around the corner, I said. 10 minutes. Her relief was immediate, too immediate. Inside, she chose a table near the window. Always optics. I sat across from her, hands folded loosely, heart steady. I've missed you, she began. I nodded. I believe you. She blinked, surprised. You do? I believe you missed the version of me that didn't challenge you, I said. That's different. Her lips pressed together. You've changed. Yes, I agreed. That was the point. She looked out the window for a moment, then back at me. I didn't mean for things to go so far. I didn't respond. You have to understand, she continued, voice softening. I was trying to hold everything together. Your father, your brother, the company. Someone had to manage it. Someone... And you chose who mattered, I said. She flinched. That's not fair. It's accurate, I replied. She leaned forward. I made mistakes. But you took things too far. You exposed us. You humiliated your brother. I felt something shift then, not anger, clarity. You're still centering the harm around yourself, I said quietly. You're still measuring damage by how it reflected on you. She shook her head. I just want my family back. I met her gaze. You want control back. The silence that followed was thick and undeniable. Finally, she said, if you'd just been patient. I smiled, a small, tired smile. If I'd been patient, I said I would still be invisible. Her eyes filled with tears, real ones this time. I'm your mother, she whispered. I deserve some grace. I watched the tears fall without rushing to fix them, without absorbing them. Grace isn't something you demand, I said. It's something you earn. Her face hardened. So that's it. You're done with us. I took a breath. I'm done being shaped by you. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. People glanced over. You think you're so evolved, she said sharply. So righteous. I remained seated, calm. No, I said, I think I'm free. That stopped her. She stared at me, really stared, as if seeing someone unfamiliar. You don't need us anymore, she said, more statement than question. I never needed permission to matter, I replied. I just needed to stop waiting for it. She left without another word. I sat there for a long moment after she was gone, watching the light shift across the floor, feeling the absence settle into something quiet and final. That was the last time I saw her. Not because I closed the door, because she finally understood she couldn't walk through it anymore. That night I went home and opened my grandmother's letter again. I traced the words with my finger, the ink faded but certain. Silence is not weakness, it is preparation. I had spent so much of my life preparing for conflict I didn't choose. Now I was preparing for something else. A future that didn't revolve around reaction. A life that didn't need to explain itself. The story was almost finished. Not because everyone had apologized. Not because everything had been fixed. But because the last attempt to rewrite me had failed. And nothing was left to prove. Only one thing remained. To decide what came next. And for the first time, that choice was mine alone. The first morning I woke up without resentment. It felt wrong. Not empty, not sad. Wrong. Like forgetting something important at home and not realizing it until you were already halfway down the highway. My body waited for the familiar tightening in my chest, the mental inventory of who might call, what might break, where I might be needed to explain myself. Nothing came. Sunlight slipped through the blinds. The city hummed outside my window. A delivery truck downshifted. Someone laughed on the sidewalk below. Life was happening without asking my permission. I made coffee and stood at the counter staring at nothing in particular when the realization settled quietly. I was no longer reacting. For most of my life, I'd been defined by response. Adjusting, anticipating, compensating. My value measured by how well I absorbed pressure without cracking. Being the reasonable one, the capable one, the daughter who didn't require maintenance. That version of me had been useful. She had also been expendable. I didn't hate her. I owed her everything. But I didn't need her anymore. Work changed first. Not the job itself, but how I moved through it. I stopped volunteering for invisible labor. I stopped smoothing over dysfunction that wasn't mine to fix. When my manager asked if I could take on one more responsibility because you're so reliable, I said no. The world didn't end. People adjusted. They always do. I started saying no to social obligations that felt obligatory rather than nourishing. I let friendships fade that only existed because I was convenient. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I caught myself humming while doing the dishes one night and had to stop and listen to the sound, startled by my own lightness. Months passed. Spring tipped into summer. The city softened. Trees filled out. Sidewalk cafes reappeared. I took long walks after work, phone tucked away, watching other people live their small, ordinary lives. I didn't feel behind anymore. I felt present. The inheritance remained quiet, exactly as my grandmother intended. No lifestyle inflation, no announcements, just a steady undercurrent of security that changed how I breathed. I paid off my remaining debt. I increased my retirement contributions. I donated anonymously to a legal aid fund that specialized in financial abuse cases. That one felt important. My father emailed once more late in the year. A careful message, neutral, informative. He'd been diagnosed with a heart condition. Not immediately serious, manageable. He didn't ask for anything. I wrote back wishing him well, nothing more. It wasn't punishment, it was proportion. Aaron never reached out again. I heard through distant channels that he'd taken a job far below what he once considered acceptable. That he complained about bad luck, that he blamed everyone except himself. That too was proportion. My mother remained a closed door. No more emails, no surprise visits, no attempts at reconciliation packaged as concern. I thought I'd grieve that more. Instead, I grieved the idea of her. The version of motherhood I'd spent decades hoping would eventually appear if I just waited long enough or proved myself worthy. Letting go of that hope felt like setting down a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. One evening, as summer edged toward fall, I visited the lake alone. The cabin was quiet, the water flat and reflective. I sat on the dock with my feet just above the surface, watching the sky change colors. I brought my grandmother's letter with me, folded thin from being read too many times. I read it again slowly, not for instruction, for recognition. She had seen me, not as a role, not as a support structure, not as a backup plan, as a person. That mattered more than anything she'd left me on paper. As the sun dipped below the trees, I realized something else. The revenge everyone imagines is loud, public, satisfying in the way a slammed door feels satisfying. This wasn't that. This was quieter, more permanent. I didn't take my brother's place. I didn't destroy my parents. I didn't rewrite the past. I stepped out of it. I let the truth finish its work without needing to narrate it. I stopped negotiating my worth with people who benefited from undervaluing it. That was the real ending. Not the hearings, not the documents, not the inheritance. The moment I stopped needing them to understand, When I drove back into the city that night, windows down, cool air filling the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Forward momentum, not ambition, not escape. Choice. I don't know what comes next in the way people usually mean it. There's no dramatic pivot, no sweeping declaration, no montage set to music. Just days that belong to me. Just decisions made without fear of correction. Just a life built quietly, intentionally, without needing to prove it deserved to exist. If you're listening to this, and you've ever been the one expected to endure because you were capable, if you were praised for being strong when what you needed was support, if you were told to be patient while someone else was handed what you'd earned, this is the part no one tells you. You don't have to explode to reclaim yourself. You don't have to win loudly. You don't have to burn the house down to walk away. Sometimes the most powerful ending is choosing peace without asking permission. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived a version of it, or if you're still finding your way out of silence, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about justice, boundaries, and the quiet kind of revenge that actually lasts, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because the best stories aren't about what we take back. They're about what we finally let go of.